tonight is kind of all about just casual conversation and kind of talking about things that concern you. So one of the most popular questions I get is, how do you do it all? That is a great question. But I really just don't allow myself to live in limits. I don't allow myself to live in a box. And when I got the whole name of the seminar and the conference and some of the different things that I was doing, I got shattered, literally to break to the point where you can't put it back together, limits that have been put on you. And for me, it's about not letting other people define what I can do. And it's living a life without compromise. And so many a times we'll go into prayer, or we'll see a dream, or we'll have a vision of something, and we'll feel like God's told us to do something, and then life happens. Then you try and it doesn't work. Then somebody tells you that it's not going to work. And really, the way that you don't allow yourself to live within a box or within limits is to listen to what God says. And I know that sounds so deep and, crazy. And oh my God, how do I know if it's God? How do I know if it's me? And really, the way that you do that is through practice and prayer, and you get to know his voice better. For now, while you're still learning his voice, stick with writing down some of the things that you've dreamt, some of the things that you feel have been downloaded to you, and find other people who are living outside of the limits to be wise counsel. Because if you are trying to break out of the box, you have these lofty goals, these lofty dreams, and then you ask advice from people who are doing nothing with their life, then obviously they're not going to have too much hope for what you have going on. And so all of the Google Hangouts will be on different topics, but the first topic tonight is just in general, how do you break limits? How do you even endeavor in doing something different, something that's out of the box? For me, I'm a mom, and certain people told me when you become a mom, there's certain things that you can't do. And when you become a wife, there's certain things that you can't do. As a teacher, there's certain things that you can't do. And there's always something that you can't do. And I'm well, sheesh, I have a bunch of stuff that I want to do, that I can do, that I know I can do. And so living a life outside of limits is challenging. It looks silly, it's questioned, but it's totally worth it. And as you break the limits and you look back at how they're shattered on the ground, then you're amazed by the things that you've been able to accomplish, because you haven't used I can't. You haven't used that in your vocabulary. And so it's an exciting place to be. One of the questions that I got on Facebook, I'm just going to pull it up. One of the questions I got was, what steps should someone put in place to sustain not allowing limitations to hinder their forward movement? Great question. And so the key for me in this question is, how do they sustain not allowing limitations to hinder their forward movement? And I think that this is kind of easy to fall into, because if you feel like you've accomplished certain things, then you can't always plateau. I mean, that's always a possibility. But if you're constantly writing down goals and things for you to achieve, putting timelines with them, there are certain things that as you continue to dream and you continue to write, then you'll sustain that forward movement. I think not becoming complacent and really not being satisfied. And so if you're at that point where you're never satisfied and you're just well, that was great, and you pat yourself on the back, but you're it's not enough. And not enough in a sense that you're downing yourself for what you've accomplished, but that you always have a next step. For some people I know, they're as soon as I finish this, I'm done. Life is just gonna stop, but it doesn't. And so constantly set goals for yourself. Another question that I got was, how do single women focus on their now current single life and not limit themselves in the season of singleness? Great question. So when you're single, when you're married, you always have this idea that because of your status, then there are certain things that you cannot do. I've heard single people say, I'm gonna wait till I get married because I want to pick out a home with my husband, or I'm gonna wait till I get married to travel the world because I want to travel the world with my husband. Do you know that there are people who get married and then the next month they're not married? And I'm not saying that your marriage goes sour, but I mean, what if he gets in a car accident? What if you get in a car accident? Somebody dies. So like you've been waiting 20 years to live this life with your spouse and now you don't have one again. I mean, I know that it's a real thing, but if you think about it, no status that you have in life has to stop you from what you're going to accomplish. And so I would encourage you as a single person that not to limit your goals into your singleness or to your marriedness, but do what it is that you are destined to do, not allowing for your status to stop you, because quite honestly, your spouse may be waiting as you move forward, as you sign for the house. Maybe your spouse is the realtor that'll sell it to you. As you sign for your house, maybe your spouse lives next door. You never know. And so you don't want to stop anything in your life because you're waiting on another individual to live this life with. And just because you buy a house before you get married doesn't mean that you all can't have the joy of buying one together. Just because you travel the world before you get a spouse doesn't mean that you all can't take great trips together later on. And so embrace your singleness. In the Bible, Paul talks about just the freedom in being single. There are so many things that you're able to do that married people can't do. And not that being married is not a great thing, but right now you're at a time in your life where you don't really have to ask anybody questions. You spend money, you do what you do, you go on trips, and you don't really have to worry about someone at home to take care of. And not that it's a worry or a burden, but it's just a different way of life. And so embrace all of the things that your singleness has to offer, and don't live your life waiting for another individual. Another question that I got was, how do you discover if you have put limitations on yourself? That is probably just as frequent as other people putting limitations on you. And so quite honestly, if you are putting limitations on yourself, it's kind of hard to judge if it's a limitation or just knowing yourself. And so here's what I would say. If you find yourself making a lot of excuses of why you can't do something, then you probably are putting a limitation on yourself. A lot of times I find that we justify really strongly the things that we actually should be doing. And so the way that you run away from putting limitations on yourself is accountability. And so a lot of times if you have an accountable person in your life that you are bouncing ideas off of, having conversation with, they have a space, or there's a space outside of just you and like what goes on in your head of how you can accomplish things. And so if I'm sitting at home, I may tell myself, you'll never be able to finish this degree. But I know people who have finished degrees, and I, hold myself accountable to them. In conversations with them, they're gonna tell me stuff like, girl, please, you can study. Or this is what you can do. This is what you can do with your schedule. And so I think being open about our lives and being open about our dreams, sometimes it's embarrassing to step out there and say, I wanna start a business, or I want to get a PhD, or I want to travel the world, or have a multi-million-dollar company. And sometimes people are looking at you like, oh, okay, wow, lofty. But once you find those people in your life who have accomplished a lot and they become your accountability partner, they drive you and they push you. And so the way that you can stop limitations on yourself is to watch how often you make excuses and watch how valid those excuses are. Find out what God says about you and what He says that you can do, and I guarantee you won't put limitations on yourself. So if you guys, those are some of the questions that I got online. If you guys have any questions, then go ahead and type them into this Google chatty thing somewhere around here, and I'll answer questions. So part of the Hangout is, I don't want to just talk, but I actually want to talk about things that are relevant to people or that are on your heart. And so even when people look at the archives of this, then they will be able to look at answers to your questions. What I find is that a lot of times if you have a question about it, there are at least 100 other people that have the same exact question. Even if it doesn't make sense in your head, then somebody else hears it and they're like, yes. I'm so happy that they asked that question. And so if you have a question, go ahead and type them in. And then also I'll check and see if we have any more on social media. I know something that we discussed when we had the Shatter seminar was a lot of questions that women had were, how do I make sure that I'm taking care of my responsibilities as a woman while still trying to push the limits, but not neglecting my responsibilities? And I think that really is a valid concern. I think we as women really take on the world on our shoulders. And one of the things that I always say is, you can't define a wife by what someone else says a wife is. You can't define a mother by what someone else says that a mother is. You really need to, in your situation, do it based on what you've experienced. When you enter a marriage, you all make an agreement on what that looks like for your household. Even when you have children, the person that you have children with, you all have to make an agreement on what that looks like for your household. One of the things I always say is this: in order for you to be a good mom, you need to set a good example for your kids. The best example that you can set is actually doing something with your life. And I know that traditionally, that we said that a good mom does this and a good mom does that and a good mom does this, but a good mom shows even their kids that there are no limits, that there's nothing that they cannot do. For me personally, I've been getting my PhD for the past 2.5 years. I actually just finished my coursework on Friday, which I'm super excited about. But when I started my PhD program, I had 2 newborns at home that I was nursing at the time. And that was difficult for me. But what I realized is that the more that I'm able to do, the more that they feel like they will be able to do. And so when they look back at my life, it's something worth looking at. When they look back at the things that I've been able to accomplish, I've set a phenomenal example for the things that they can do. And with that being said, taking care of your responsibilities, carve out time for everything. And so if I feel like, I may be neglecting the kids right now, or I've been really busy at school, we carve out playtime where we say, you know what, this day, this night, we're not going to do anything else. All we're going to do is what you all want to do. And so we value those times. They are excited about those times to either just go to Yogurtland or take a getaway or take a night away or take a day with pajamas, or one day we had a powder party and we just put baby powder over everything. And it was really a big mess to clean up, but it was a whole lot of fun. And so I think that you can take care of your responsibilities. You can be a good wife. You can be a good mother. But know that part of you being a good wife, being a good mother, is meeting expectations for your household and not what you've allowed other people to set for you. You are being watched as a wife. You're being watched as a mother. Give them something to look forward to.